Imagine you're being chased and you're running away from someone. And you're fast. You've been called the fastest in the world. But every time you look back over your shoulder, they're a little bit closer. 2 years ago, they were a mile away. Last year, it was half a mile. But today, you can hear their footsteps. That is the situation of the US-China AI race. Every few months, America builds a better AI model. And then every few months, China builds one that is almost as good, but at 1/10 the price. And somehow the gap between the best American AI models and the best Chinese AI models, at least as measured by benchmarks, keeps on shrinking. So now we're in a race. And if you just watch the news, it's pretty hard to understand how far ahead America is or isn't. Plus that picture gets muddied because China might be stealing American AI models. And there are reasons that tons of people are switching to these Chinese models anyways. It's important to know where we stand and how this might all play out. So let's look at the data. Back in 2023, this wasn't a competition. China was like the kid getting lapped in gym class. The performance gap between the best American models and the best Chinese models was around 30%, at least measured by the top benchmarks. And these benchmarks measure reasoning, coding ability, writing ability, basically everything that an AI can do. But then by the end of 2024, that gap had shrank a lot. It went from 30 points to 17 to 3. In February of 2025, DeepSeek briefly topped all of the benchmark charts. And since then, Chinese AI models have gone back and forth with American AI models. But then earlier this month, Stanford released an AI report, basically aggregating a bunch of this data, and found that on the latest benchmarks, American models beat out Chinese models by about 2.7%. It was Claude Opus 4.6 at the top, and then ByteDance's Dola Seed 2.0 right behind it. But 2.7% is just one number. And these benchmarks can be gamed a little bit, which we're gonna talk about. I think a better question is how many months behind is China? Turns out we've got a lot of answers on this. So Epoch AI is a company that tracks all of this stuff. They published an analysis that said China tends to lag US models by about 7 months. And then Demis Hassabis, who is the founder of DeepMind, said that they're behind by a matter of months. So call that anywhere 3 to 5. Kai-Fu Lee is another person that's really respected in this space. He's a Chinese AI researcher, and he put it at 3 months. But let's not just take their word for it. We should also look at how this shows up in the real world. The founder of Lindy AI has said on X that at their company, they spend a ton of time evaluating these Chinese models versus the American models because the Chinese models are so much cheaper. So if they can do the same work for much less price, then they would switch to the Chinese models. And he said he kept seeing the same pattern, which is that the Chinese benchmarks would come out and they would look incredible. Then his team would test it and they would fall way short of what the benchmarks had said. So he said, we don't trust these benchmarks anymore. The numbers look good, but it seems like they're basically lying. And this raises a really good point. Before we panic about China overtaking America in the AI race, we need to ask, are their models actually this good or are they just cheating? Because when they come out of nowhere and look really impressive, start to wonder if maybe there's some asterisks. And it turns out there are. So asterisk number 1, Moonshot, which is a Chinese company, they make the Kimi K2 model, came out with a new model and it scored 50% on a benchmark called Humanity's Last Exam. It's a really tough benchmark. But then independent researchers ran the same test using that model and got 29.4%. And so that's a 20-point gap on the same test. Something fishy is going on. Either they were lying or they found a way to cheat on the test. And really, this is called benchmark contamination. If a test exists on the internet, then AI models can be trained on that. And then when they're quizzed on it later in the benchmark, they can give the right answer, but because it's in their training data, not because they thought of it on their own. It's like studying the exact questions before an exam. You can ace the exam, but that doesn't mean you know the material. But people know about this, and so we have designed tests that are cheat-proof. And the way they do this is they create questions based off of code issues and other issues that were created after the model was trained. So these are new issues that there's no way the model could have ever seen before. But here's where it gets interesting, because when you test Chinese models on these sort of cheat-proof tests, they almost always do worse, and way worse than American models do. So that would suggest that these Chinese companies are training their models on the test data to help them perform well on benchmarks. Second asterisk, that 2.7% number that I quoted earlier is based on arena.ai, which is a website that compares a bunch of different LLMs, and then people can vote on what answer they like better. But that mostly tests writing ability. When you look at other things, there's bigger differences. So actually on coding and math, the Chinese models and the American models are pretty similar. But on novel reasoning, American models are much better. And then on long horizon agent tasks, which are basically where an AI needs to string together a bunch of different steps to create a solution, the American models just blow the Chinese ones out of the water. They're way better at that. Third asterisk is that Arena.ai is in and of itself kind of gameable. For example, Meta got caught submitting a special version of their Ollama model that was tuned to appease the voters. So it gave very beautiful and confident answers that looked really nice. It got a really high rating, but then when they released the actual model, it was different from what they put onto Arena.ai. And so people didn't like it. Another thing is that people will just submit a bunch of different model versions and then see what performs best in the arena. And then they release it and say, look how good we did on LM Arena. But it really is just selection bias. Fourth asterisk, and this one just came out yesterday, at least at the time of this filming. The White House just came out and accused China of an industrial scale campaign to steal American AI. They said that they have created tens of thousands of fake accounts to use the American AI models and steal stuff from them. And this process is called distillation. Basically, you ping a model with a ton of different questions across all sorts of domains. And then based on the answers that it gives, you use that info to train your model. So it's sort of like in a test, you're looking over at the really smart kid in class and seeing what he wrote, and then just copying the answers. So this makes it look like you're really smart, but the thing is, you will never be able to be smarter than the person that you're copying from. Now, distillation by itself isn't terrible. American companies actually do this too to make their models a little bit simpler or cheaper. But all of the big AI companies have rules against doing this at a big scale, and the Chinese companies are violating that. So I know there's a lot of different things there, but it's likely that the gap is a little bit bigger than that 2.7% number. China is fudging the data at least a little bit. But there's a reason that this kind of all doesn't matter, and it's that tons of people are switching to Chinese models anyways. And the reason is that they're cheap. They're like insultingly cheap. So for example, a task costing $15 on GPT-5 can be done on DeepSeek for 50 cents. That's 30 times cheaper. As an example of this, there was a company that was using AI to classify financial documents, and they're spending $4,200 a month with ChatGPT. Then they switched to DeepSeek and the bill dropped to $210 a month. And the accuracy only dropped by 2%. So it was a little bit worse, but not by much. So it's kind of like, imagine you're shopping for a car and you can get a brand new Tesla for $80,000, or you can get a new Chinese car that is $2,600. And it's almost the same. It's not quite as good, but close. Some people are still gonna buy the Tesla for sure. They want whatever is the best out there. But a lot of people are gonna go for the more affordable option. And we can actually see this happening. There's a company called OpenRouter that lets you route between a bunch of different APIs of all of these AI models. So you can really easily switch depending on the task that you're doing. And they publish data on what models people are using most. Back in early 2025, Chinese models on OpenRouter were 2% of all tokens used. As of April 2026, they're now 45%. And the most popular AI model on OpenRouter right now is Chinese. It's Xiaomi's MiMo V2 Pro, which is kind of a handful to say, but people like it. And there's some other big companies that have switched. For example, Airbnb now runs its customer service on Qwen, which is a Chinese model from Alibaba. Cursor has built one of their latest releases around a Chinese model. And an Andreessen Horowitz partner estimated that around 80% of US startups are using Chinese models. Now that's just an estimate. Honestly, that seems a bit high to me, but that's what they said. So the key takeaway here is that in the race for the best AI model, America is still number one, but in the race for the most used AI model, it's not looking so great. Here's the thing though, how is this even possible? How are Chinese companies able to get models that are so much cheaper than American ones? Are they just subsidizing everything? Well, maybe. We don't really know because Beijing is the only one who has all of that data and they are not giving us any info about it. But they also innovated. So in particular, DeepSeek came out with two really interesting innovations. The first is called Mixture of Experts. And these are kind of complicated, but we can break it down simply. So a traditional AI model is like one doctor who knows everything. But if he's at a hospital, every patient that comes in has to go through him. So it's kind of slow, it's kind of expensive. Mixture of Experts is like you have 100 different specialists. You come in, one person sees you at the door, they figure out what your issue is, and then they route you to the right person. So only one or two people out of the 100 would have to be working on that issue. It makes it much more efficient, and as a result of that, much cheaper. The second thing that they did is something called sparse attention. So a traditional AI model would look at every single word that you have written in your prompt and then compare that to every other word to see how they all relate. But sparse attention is more similar to how a normal human actually reads. They pull out the key concepts and understand those to get the idea of the whole document. Because you don't need to understand how the word the or the word A correlates with all these other words. You just need the big picture. If that doesn't totally make sense, that's okay. Don't worry about it. Just know that they are innovating to make these models cheaper. The other thing is just that salaries in China are much lower than, say, in the Bay Area, so they can pay people less and still get good results. All right, so now we've talked about where we are, but let's talk about where this goes. What does the future look like if Chinese models become the dominant ones? Scenario one is that they become the default for most of the world. And if this happens, it kind of looks like the Android-Apple split. If you live in America, you probably know a bunch of people who have iPhones. They're the most common phone here. Tons of people have them. They love them. But if you go to the rest of the world, especially like second and third world countries, most people have Androids because iPhones are just too expensive. It's like a cool thing in America, but if your GDP per capita is $5,000 a year, then you're just not buying an iPhone. And that's basically what's happening with these Chinese models. When you look at usage in, say, Africa or in Latin America, Chinese models are way higher because they're just cheaper. Scenario two is that Chinese values get baked into the world's AI. For example, if you ask DeepSeek about Tiananmen Square, it's going to give you a very different answer than ChatGPT would, because there is censorship baked into all of these. So if a bunch of the world is using these Chinese models and they can't get information, or certain information is presented in a unique way that has a Chinese angle, that's going to affect a lot of things. Scenario three is that American companies become distributors of Chinese AI models. It's like we talked about with Cursor, they're already using a Chinese model behind some of their coding platform. Now all of a sudden, American companies might be the front end, but the Chinese models supply the back end. So it's kind of weird. It's like the packaging is American AI, but really what's inside is Chinese. Scenario four is probably the biggest disruptor, and it's that the business models of OpenAI and Anthropic break. Because these companies have spent hundreds of billions of dollars to train incredible AI models. They want to be at the frontier, they want to be the best. But if everyone's just going to go with the Chinese model that's 10 times cheaper and say 3% less good, then that whole business model just breaks. They're not going to be able to make back the money that they need. And scenario five is where these Chinese models start to take the rest of the world's data. That is one of the biggest reasons why people are staying away from these Chinese models right now, is they're pretty skeptical that the data will be used by the Chinese government in ways that they don't like. You can't quite say for sure, but based on what we know of China, that seems pretty likely. But if enough people start switching because of the cost, all of a sudden, they might have really sensitive information on all of these different companies and individuals. That's pretty scary. So that is what the US-China AI race looks like right now. On benchmarks, China is just a tiny bit behind. Latest estimates are saying 2.7%. On harder benchmarks, it seems closer to 8 months, but tons of people are switching already. So in terms of real-world usage, they might already be winning. The one thing I know for sure is that this is fascinating and is a great thing to keep following.